That'd be great. So I want to start the afternoon session just before we plunge into getting our hands dirty. The afternoon session feels very different than the morning session. The morning session is kind of a lot of you guys doing a lot of activities, thinking about how it might work in your class, asking questions about the system overall. In this afternoon session, we're going to be actually plunging in and trying to create, we're starting this difficult process. And so it's much more of a working session, much less of kind of a learning experience, much more of sitting shoulder to shoulder trying to get started on these. So just wanted to kind of encourage you to brace yourself for that. It's going to be, it's not going to feel as like smooth and hermetically sealed as the morning session did. It's everyone has stuff that they've already thought about or haven't thought about and can get running on or needs to start working on. So I just want to invite you all to be gentle with yourselves if some of this is difficult, because this is difficult. Before we plunge into that, though, I do like to see if there's anything that folks wanted to talk about, questions answered, before we get into this from the morning session. I got one there, but I got one ahead of you.
Okay.
And that is, what about team-based learning in asynchronous online formats?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Whoa, what the hell's that, right? So there's a fellow by the name of Sune Palsol at University of Texas El Paso who has been doing this for a while. And he wrote an article that I'll send to Hillary and Stephanie that they can send out to you about how he's figured out it works. I don't know if you can read all this back from where you were. I would have brought a handout if I had anticipated the question, but basically he's got what it looks like in class, when it's in class team-based learning on this column, and what he does moving it online in this column. So pre-class preparation, multiple choice individual readiness assurance, and team readiness assurance tests with immediate feedback assessment technique forms. The if-at, those are the scratch-off. That's the face-to-face class. Online, assigned readings from books, websites, discovery questions, and so forth. They use Blackboard. So multiple choice, IRAT using online testing. Then the TRAT, based on a discussion board over 2 days. There is a team leader that is assigned, so there's more structure here than we would use in face-to-face classes. And it's their responsibility to compile the answers that the team came up with and submit the team answers. And then there's a team reporter, which is also a role that rotates, whose job it is to basically describe how that conversation unfolded, what the various lines of thought were, how the argument went one way or the other, and submit that for the team. So the reason why he actually has that reporter role is to try and stimulate the same kind of reflection that scratch moment stimulates. That moment where you scratch and are right or wrong, that stimulates like an instant reflection on what just happened and some decisions about how to do it differently on the next scratch. You don't get that immediate feedback in an online format, so you have to purposefully elicit it with an assignment, with a reflection assignment. So I know that he has reporters do that. I think his practice has moved on so that all students have to write at least some short reflection of the discussion themselves as an individual assignment. So it's not just the reporter that gets that benefit of the reflection. So then the mini lecture is basically he writes something up to explain what people didn't get, or he may even do a little quick PowerPoint with a voice, speaking into the microphone. And then these spool out over weeks. Peer evaluations are done after every readiness assurance process, not application activities. So he has them do more peer evaluations than we would do in a face-to-face class to keep those social channels of communication as tight as you can get them in a fully online class. And then he's got his grading there. So he, like I said, I'll email this to Hillary and Stephanie and they can send it out to you, but he did a nice little graph of it. I think I might have to shrink it a little bit. Yeah, okay, so it's basically what I just said. Individual multiple choice test. The group discusses answers over 2 days and builds consensus on answers. The team leader compiles the answers and then takes that one team test for the team. and then post them on a common discussion board or wiki. He's moved to a wiki. They do a peer evaluation after every rap, and then the leader and the reporter rotates. So you can read in detail all this stuff. He'll send it to you. I don't have any experience teaching team-based learning in fully online environments. I'm sure at some point I'll get some. I can't speak to it from my own experience. So that's what I know about that. Any thoughts or ideas about how that may or may not work for you? I know you two both are asking me about fully online. Ma'am?
Maybe you also could utilize the chat room features as well.
Mm-hmm.
And teams could, each team would have their own chat room, and then you could set up a time where they all chat and then reach, and that way that gives the team leader a little more direction and say, okay, folks, what's the answer to 10? And then they could get that.
Synchronous chat is really, it's an interesting phenomenon. It makes me nuts, just personally, because in synchronous chat, well, first of all, everyone's got to arrange a time, and if it's an online class, it could be God knows where in the world. But also, in synchronous chat, the fastest typist is the extrovert. And so what I have learned recently from a nurse at UT who moved a nursing class entirely online is she used to have threaded discussions on the discussion board and Blackboard. Students hated it. Because in order for them to use it, she had to require it. And for her to require it, then it just felt like, ugh. Students went in and said the minimum number of things necessary to get the points, and that was that. Instead, she's actually moved to having them use a wiki, which is one document that they can all update. And so it's a kind of dialogue that they have in the various updatings that they do to the document, and maybe some side conversations are stimulated around that, but it's just one place they go to. They don't have to navigate in among threads and things like that. And that was news to me. Ma'am?
One of the options would be to use Adobe Connect.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually see each other and talk to each other.
If your students are savvy, around that, yeah, for sure. You guys clearly have a site license to Adobe Connect, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have not splashed around in that pond myself.
I thought Blackboard had Adobe Connect in it. Blackboard Learn 9 has Adobe Connect as part of it. That was what I was under.
Sure. Probably. I got nothing. Sir?
Yeah, I tried the wiki approach to doing this, and this last semester ago, I had a student who's really opposed to it because right at the last, they got all this work done, and right at the end, a student who really hadn't been participating came in and re-edited everything and made it actually less scored. So what was actually finished became a rebellion to the people who really worked on it a lot, and some of the things.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that to go back and see what versions were unless that was brought up. So there's issues with that too.
Sure. Yeah, there's no silver bullet. Yeah. All right, well, I wanted to make sure to talk about that. I actually don't have much experience with it. I know about this article. I can connect you with Sune. He's on the listserv. Other people online, there's Gail Feigenbaum is a nurse at the University of New Mexico who teaches a hybrid format team-based learning class. She's got some fully online stuff. So again, the listserv, you can find friends out there. And I do want to say about the listserv, we take great pains to make it very practical, very collegial. When people try to move it too far in the formal, scholarly, 9-mile-long post that cites many of their own posts in the reference, there was a fellow, very famous fellow, who I took some flack for banning from the list, but I banned him from the list because he was just killing the roly-poly sort of easygoing practical conversation by making it super stiff. So I just want to say that's the kind of experience that we try to help the listserv continue to provide. Cool. All right, other questions or thoughts from the morning session before we dive into the afternoon? No? Cool. Okay.
Can we insert questions about the total online internet as we go along?
Sure.
That might be easier than just coming up right now with this little blurb.
Yeah, and I will call on the rest of y'all to help me respond to them since that's not really an area of expertise for me. We could just sort of collaboratively brainstorm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa.
Just want to wake up.
Okay. Hooray. Okay, cool. All right, so we are going to, this is a working session, as I've warned you. Really, there's going to be two things that we're going to try to do today. We're going to try and get really clear on specifying what you want your students to be able to do or demonstrate knowledge of at the end of your learning activity, and then we're going to start building that learning activity out. So what I want you to do, we're going to do these quick brainstorm sessions. There's going to be like a breathe in, breathe out kind of experience here. Before we start this, though, I think it would probably be, since this is not like, this is a work session, this is not a learning session, so I'm going to break some of the rules of team-based learning. I think it might be helpful if in the brainstorming you do around generating your own application activity, you are able to work with people in disciplines similar to you. So I invite you, if you haven't, if you want to get up and work with somebody who's in your discipline or in a discipline similar to you, feel free to do that now. If not, we can just kind of stay where we're at. We got 3, 5, 3. I may need to move some people just to get this, roughly the same number of people at tables. Social science over there.
We got economics and anthropology.
Nice. Can we raise the lights just a little bit? Because it's just halfway. Yeah. Because it's really more important that they're able to. Oh, that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. You know. All right, so I'll adapt it. What we're going to do is we're going to be working on our individual things, and then at some point I'm going to ask you folks as a group to decide upon who's to kind of move forward and showcase and dialogue around. But I will warn those tables with many people. I'm going to ask for 2 from you. Not each, just per table. So.
What's the many cutoff?
What's the mini cut? I don't know. We'll see how well behaved you are. I'll decide that later. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is pull out. No, you guys are good. Yeah, you're a crack, fast-moving, nimble, agile killer squad. All right. So everybody's going to need some paper and a pen or pencil. So kind of pull that out if you. All right. So what?
Starlight, and then we need you here.
I'll stay here, you go over there. Okay.
How many doctors does it take? Cool. All right. Fantastic. Everybody played along. Good. Okay. So some of you are going to have put more forethought into this. This is going to be easy and short. Some of you, this may be brand new. We're going to do our best on that. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a couple of minutes and kind of make 2 columns on your piece of paper. And we're going to be focusing in on exactly something real specific you want students to learn how to be able to do. But we're going to start from, I don't know, brainstorming a particular theory, process, construct, something that you want to kind of be the arena in which you develop this application activity. So this is totally up to you. You don't need one of each of these. This is just kind of like, I listed these off as stimuli for your creative juices, but basically this is the content, right? When you think, what's the content of your course? This stuff. Okay, and then we're going to take one step towards application, like in the real world. What are some real world contexts in which this stuff is useful? Don't worry about getting too specific at this point. We're just brainstorming some potential areas for work. Take like 2 minutes to do that. Don't work too hard. But do it individually. This is all individually for you, because the goal is for you as individuals to come away with a start for your class. All right. I said quick, I meant quick. we're just gonna, if you got like one, something to think about. So now at this point, whoa. Yeah, so now at this point, what I'd like you to do is share with the folks at your table what you came up with, especially clarifying for them, if they're not in your discipline, the relationship between the columns, basically, how the content, the basic realm of content that you are wanting to work with can be put to use in the real world. All right. Here, I'll put this back up. Okay, we're gonna continue our conversations. Like I said, we're gonna be having a breathe in, breathe out thing. So I always feel like a villain at this particular point because teachers are so desperately hungry to talk to each other about teaching. They get almost no motivation to do so externally and very little time or structure to do so. And so when we come together and we have these conversations, it's so nourishing. But when you run workshops like this, you have to be the bastard who from time to time just cuts it off and says, we got to move on. So sorry about that. But we're gonna do some more thinking and then reconvene those discussions. So you can pick up where you left off. So the purpose of that was just to kind of get your juices flowing around specific topic that you wanted to work with, specific piece of content you wanted to work with. And so now, and maybe share them and explain them with one another to kind of get a little bit clearer in your own head exactly what you were talking about. So now what we're doing is we're going to tighten down one level of specificity. I have way more of these if you need more handouts. And we're going to talk about how to be very intentional around describing specifically what we want students to be able to do intellectually at the end of one of these activities. So there's this fantastically practical thing called Bloom's taxonomy of instructional objectives. And though it sounds like many of you are familiar with it, what I do want to do is very briefly walk through it because I made the assumption from sounds like that at a previous workshop that everybody was equally familiar with it. And that turned out not to be the case, and I wound up really putting some people in an uncomfortable situation. So the goal for this first half of this afternoon is to specify a set of specific outcomes you want from this application activity. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. This was from a bullying case that someone used in I think it was either a social psychology or developmental psych class. So she used some of these verbs. She wanted students to be able to recall what they knew specifically about adolescent development and social systems theory, to read a scenario that she provided them, and from it differentiate between aspects of that scenario that would contribute and those that wouldn't to the bullying situation that it described. Look at some potential interventions that were suggested and critique them, and then as a group come up with their own intervention plan. So it was a bullying case in an adolescent development class, and this is how she decided specifically what she wanted her students to be able to do intellectually. So I'm going to walk very quickly through this. I'm not going to read it to you or anything like that. I'm just going to, as an overview, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues in the mid-50s, 56 actually is when the first publication came out. They weren't meaning to generate some really amazing educational framework that would be used by thousands around the world. They were wanting to write a textbook, that's all. And they were wanting to provide test questions to go along with the material in that textbook. But they did have the forward-thinking perspective to figure, well, different test questions test different levels of knowledge. So if we really want the teachers who use our textbooks to be able to assess what their students are learning, we need to write different kinds of test questions. Well, what different kinds of test questions do we need to write? So they developed this roughly hierarchical set of objectives of different kinds of thinking that students can do. So from the very simplest, this is rote memory, up into understanding. So rote memory is, what year was the War of 1812, right? Understanding, comprehension, is an acquisition of why a certain fact is important and its relationship to other facts. So you basically memorize something, you have no idea what to do with it, that's called inert knowledge. The next step up is understanding the relationship of that fact to other facts and maybe when it might be useful. And these verbs are things that you can do. And these aren't the only verbs in the English language, right, that are appropriate to this, but it's a nice menu. In fact, God, if nothing else, one of the most valuable things about this stinking piece of paper is when I'm writing a test, and I have decided there's got to be 20 questions on that test, and I get to like question 15, and I'm like dry. Like, I got nothing. I've thought of everything that I want to ask them. Well, let's see, differentiate. You know what? Actually, I did want them to be able to differentiate between this and that. Okay, I got one. So it's just a nice well to go back to keep the intellectual juices flowing when you're writing a test. So you got rote memory, you got understanding, which is about meaning. You got application, which is the ability to know when to use a certain piece of knowledge and how. Then you've got analysis, which is breaking something complex into its constituent pieces and understanding the relationship between those parts. This is a really, when I do a critical thinking workshop, this is usually the one I hone in on, because this is the one that I think is the meatiest across disciplines. This is something we all want our students to be able to do. The complex things that we put in front of them differ across disciplines, but we all want them to be able to break them into their parts and understand the structures of them. Is it at all possible to drop the temperature in here a bit? That would be fantastic. Thank you. Hot rooms after lunch are bad. We did not have a heavy Italian lunch, and there are windows, so there's two things going in our favor. Okay, so after analysis, like I said, these are roughly hierarchical, getting roughly more complex the higher you go. Evaluation, higher level, you have to apply an external criteria to something. And of course, the most difficult is the creation, the synthesis act. And that's why this afternoon is going to feel different than this morning, because often this morning you were just being asked to evaluate, analyze and evaluate. And today, this afternoon, we're going to be asking you to kind of create, and it's hard. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes going over those for folks who might not be familiar with them. And circle back to what they can look like in a specific set of learning outcomes. So now we're going to do the breathe in, breathe out thing again. I want you to spend a couple of minutes kind of sharpening, choosing something that you came up with in the first quick brainstorm, and using this as something to prime the pump for your creative juices to pick something and see if you can specify specific things that you want your students to be able to do as a result of having done that application activity. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get it. It's hard, I know. It's a little weird. You don't really know where to start, but just give it a try. Look at the verbs. You've got some content in mind. Just give it a shot. Take a few minutes to do this individually, by yourself. All right, I think everybody's got at least something to share. So before we start sharing, the history teacher in the video, the blonde lady, she, when it's application activity day, which is 3 out of the 5 days of her unit, she has something, when students walk in, all it says on the top of the screen is, the point. And then she's got these things listed. So students walk in and they see like, the point of today is this stuff, and it really helps for them focus their studying on the test and focus their conversation. So now I want you to do what you did before. Share with folks at your table what you came up with. Folks who are listening to people that are sharing, see if you can suggest maybe additional verbs, additional outcomes of the same kind of domain that your colleagues might not have thought of. This is us really workshopping. We're workshopping like writers do, kind of what we came up with and how it can be like polished up with and by each other. So have a go. Okay. Once again, I have to be the bad guy and reconvene for a little bit more calibrated discussion. I love that people won't stop talking. That's so awesome, but it's so terrible that I have to do this. A bell, yeah. People flip the lights, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna do what we can to move to the next level of specificity, and we're gonna start at a very foundational, very simple template. You remember this morning when I had you hold up the cards, I had the application activity and I said given this, decide that, right? So given some scenario, here's just a really gnarly multiple choice question, right? That's really the bottom line. Starting with developing application activities, that's a great place to start. And if that's what we come out of here with, that'll be awesome. That'll be fantastic because that's something that you can use to expose your students to realistic data, problems, scenarios, force them into discussion to evaluate the merits of one answer versus another, come to consensus as teams, stimulate discussion among the teams, pick those fights. If all the teams come to the same answer and there's not necessarily a right answer, then you ask, were there any minority reports? Anybody disagree with their team? You say yes. So if this is the meat of what we do today, that's fantastic. There's other structures. There's other flavors of the same structure. The make a specific choice, significant problem, same problem, simultaneous report. This is the kind of meat and potatoes of it, though. So this is where you're going to reel back into your individual world and have to brainstorm a scenario, kind of write it out, and develop a gnarly multiple choice question about it. I do want to show you because I heard some discussion about evaluation level thinking, and one of the evaluation level question formats, this is from a different presentation I did, the question stem is a student was asked to list and describe something. And then the student wrote, and you give them a sample of this hypothetical student's work, right? And then the multiple choice question is the student's answer A, lists everything and describes it correctly. B, lists them all, but they're either out of order or some descriptions are inaccurate, or C, does not include. So what you can do is you can generate a multiple choice question that has evaluation built into it. Yeah, so the blah, blah, blah could be a very long paragraph that would force the students to basically grade some hypothetical student's answer. Yeah, so that's kind of a nice, kind of cool piece of teaching Kung Fu, is building a multiple choice question like that. That's kind of a mini application activity. Given this, decide that. And then another kind of cool piece of teaching Kung Fu around multiple choice questions is, given this, here's your scenario. Possible answer 1 because reason X. Possible answer 1 because reason Y. I think we talked about this this morning. Maybe I forget who I've said what to. But the idea being that maybe what you're grading is not necessarily the answer, or the right thing to do, or the very best choice to make, but the rationale for it. So that's just a couple things to prime the pump. So what I want you to do, now having identified a domain that you're going to be playing around in, and specified or made some progress specifying specific things you want students to be able to do intellectually after having done this, now is the time where we sit and we chew our tongue and we make up stories. And you pick one situation and write out a scenario, or you can even briefly describe the kind of data that you're going to give them. The more specific you can get at this point, the better, because this will serve you later. Today, to be kind of quick and dirty, you could say, well, I'll give them data that has this in it. But you've got the time, that you're devoting the time right now and the energy, so you may as well get as specific as it will serve you, so you don't have to come back and put those details in later. So this is where you write out a scenario, create a fake data set, something like that, and figure out some options that you want students to have to choose from. And so those options can be, what's the right number? Sure. Or you can have, which of the following is the very best example of, which of the following student newspapers is the very best example of this journalistic principle? That kind of thing. So there's lots of ways that you can force students to make a specific choice in response to complex data that you're presenting to them. All right? This is kind of the hardest part. So take your time, brainstorm, have some Pepsi, splash cold water on your face. Here we go. If anybody needs paper, does anybody have paper to give them? There's pads at every table. All right, great. I wanted to just, by way of inspiration or modeling, share with you this application activity from nursing. I don't know if you can read. I'll read it to the folks in the back. A patient with a brainstem stroke has collapsed a lung from intractable hiccups and feed tube aspirates. He was admitted to intensive care to deal with the subsequent pneumonia. A few weeks later, he's moved to a regular ward, and the PRN order for baclofen. Somebody's got to know how to pronounce it. Baclofen. The PRN order for baclofen has expired. Baclofen, what is that? Gabapentin family of drugs, off-label, used to control intractable hiccups. The patient has begun to hiccup again and is growing increasingly distressed that nothing is being done. The patient's wife has repeatedly come to the nurse's station demanding action. It's a Friday night of a long weekend and the doctor on call is not returning the page. The doctor has made it very clear to the nurses that he's not to be called. It appears to be a doctor oversight that it was not renewed. The wife persistently demands action and the nurse begins to cry. The head nurse intervenes. The head nurse should A, do nothing but continue to attempt to contact the doctor, B, give the patient the pill and note it on the chart, C, give the pill, chart it, and continue calling the doctor, or D, mark a pill as spoiled and leave it with the patient.
This is so great because all of that increasing emotionality, I mean, my heart's racing just thinking, imagining myself in that nurse's position.
A friend of mine was the patient.
There you go.
It's really happened.
So this is exactly the kind of application that, I mean, it gets right to that real world experience. It's trying to mimic the many conditions under which you make the decision. Besides the decision, there are the conditions around which it.
Yeah, and the conditions, it is an artistic, I mean, this unfortunately
really
did happen to a friend of mine.
Beautiful.
But it can be an artistic act to create those conditions. And there may or may not be, even in medicine, a right answer. I have colleagues who have this very simple scenario of, and they do this in medical schools, it's a car crash and a woman of a certain age has a certain kind of chest damage. You're the paramedic on the scene. Do you put her in the ambulance on her side, on her back, or sitting up? And like doctors, a room full of doctors with combined hundreds of years of professional experience can argue that and not come to a conclusion. But the reality is that poor paramedic has to put the woman in the ambulance somehow, right? And then you can scaffold that by saying, all right, well, now it turns out she's 6 months pregnant, or 2 months pregnant, or something like that. Does your answer change and why? So this is just an example of what it can look like. Just as a happy ending.
I love that.
The pill was marked as spoiled and left with the patient. And in fact, it was the wife who had done Googling to identify, I guess baclofen is misspelled there, but the wife had done some research to identify a possibility that the doctor was not aware of and made no effort to it. So for those of you who are familiar with the team-based learning community, that was Jim Sibley. Yeah, he had a stroke about 4 or 5 years ago, spent 2 months in the hospital, and he's back and kicking butt. He's got a chapter in his book. So.
Just to add to the anecdote, our group was the first one to suggest the use of gabapentin for hiccuping.
It was the first, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
When you say your group, you mean?
I conducted one of the largest hiccup studies in Europe years ago. Compared baclofen with other alpha to delta ligands, and we suggested gabapentin for hiccuping.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I really appreciate the example. I love it.
All right.
Oh, this is so great. story
yeah.
a million times.
Reconsidering.
You picked the perfect scenario.
That's awesome. All right, Jim's gonna laugh. Okay.
Just as long as he doesn't start hiccuping.
Right. No, he's fine. He's such an amazing guy. He would frequently refer to all the new features his body had, like not being able to walk so well with his left foot. And that kind of thing. He's a software guy, so he would talk about the features revision that his body had undergone. Okay, so we resume. So what I want to do is. I want to do a check-in. I mean, I've got a way that I could take us, that I want to take us. Was there at least like a couple of folks at each table who kind of came up with a scenario and that kind of thing? Okay, good. So then what I want to do is I want to take us to the next step, which is the last. It's just a compilation step, really. Yeah, let's just jump right to the fun part. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want at least one from each table. We're going to use these giant stickies and markers, wherever they are.
Where did they go? The markers right.
And the giant stickies.
Oh, it's right above. Right.
Ah, good.
Do you need the easel there?
So what we're going to do is we're going to do something that is a different form of simultaneous report than just holding up the cards. From each table, pick one, or if you want to, you can do more than one. If you want feedback on your activity, then do this for yours. Because what we're going to do is we're going to do a gallery walk. I'm going to ask as many folks as want to write their learning outcomes, as much of the scenario as they can, and their multiple choice question on one sticky. And then we're going to do a gallery walk. This is a gallery walk that was done in a microbiology class. The teams basically were told, they actually as individuals were given the homework. Here's one gigantically complex set of molecules, compound, I don't know. Here's another gigantically complex set of molecules, compound. Here are the conditions under which they were mixed. So draw the resulting compound. Like chart the resulting compound. It was like this magnificently complex activity. So they did their best as individuals at home. They came, and then as teams, they had to come to consensus on, well, no, this oxygen would do that, and draw it. Then you put them up around. This is another form of simultaneous report. And you have the other teams look at the work. You have the teams look at the work of each other's thinking and make a specific decision about those. So we're going to do that. So if you want feedback, or you want to share, or you're stuck, write what you came up with, as far as you came up with it, on a sticky with the markers, and we'll put them up and we'll do a gallery walk, and we'll continue workshopping is what we're going to do. We're going to continue workshopping.
You need one per table?
A couple per table. All right. Let's do this. Are there markers?
Yeah. Everyone should have a marker that hopefully.
Is there
ink in
enough for several markers per table in case more than one people?
Some of them might be a little too light, but we'll do what we can there. That's a stinky one. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it can't be.
All right. Five.
Concept to measure human impact on natural systems.
We got five. So
Online.
we're all going to do a collective gallery walk, and there's few enough of us that we're going to be able to have a representative team describe the scenario so that we can get some cross-disciplinary interpretation. So let's everybody stand up.
Oh, okay.
Let's do the gallery walk.
People use both sides, which I think is against the rules.
Answering multiple choice should come from this scenario.
All right, so ecological footprint.
Yeah, right here.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not
we're going to
tight.
have
Yeah.
an ecological footprint
That could be
expert describe this. Folks, we're going to do these one at a time, so have a go. All right.
All right, my learning goal is to understand and interpret the ecological footprint. The ecological footprint is a useful concept to measure the impact of human activities on natural systems. How much of the natural output are humans taking to support human activities?
Okay.
So there's a popular online calculator that can be used, and it's put up by part of the Living Planet report, and it's In my teams, the students all had at least one person with a laptop. So that was one of my sorting criteria for teams, is I asked anybody who had, how many have a laptop? So each team had a laptop, and so they will carry out a collective survey and look at the factors that affect the number that you get. And the number you get is in terms of global hectares per person that you need to support your livestock. So the multiple choice question is, which of the following has the greatest influence on the ecological footprint? A, meat consumption. B, miles driven per year. C, size of house. D, education. Or E, whether or not you recycle.
Very interesting.
And then they'd have to defend their answer.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have folks go through and describe them, and then we're going to do sort of a gallery walk activity around them. So let's just
What's
have
the
this-
answer?
Before I go to mine, I want to know what to do.
Hiccuping.
Education, I can't do that anymore. Anyway.
Let's do a poll. How many think it's meat consumption? Okay, how many
Aye.
think it's miles driven? Okay, size of house? Education?
Definitely education.
Recycling? Okay, actually, the answer revolves around meat consumption.
Despite the vegetarians?
We need to defend our answers?
Well, the problem, the reason is that built into meat consumption is the whole industrial agricultural system, which it uses enormous amounts of, emits carbon dioxide and methane, it uses a lot of energy, it uses water resources, and so that tends to have a pretty big influence.
So being a Texan, I not only have to reject your conclusion, I have to make sure all of that information is stripped out of the K-12 curriculum.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Wasn't that the state that sued Oprah?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yes, for her comment about beef, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have actually taken Thomas Jefferson out of the K-12
Oh,
curriculum,
okay.
you know, so stupid liberal. All right, so, okay, so can you?
Sure. The goal for the student was to recognize and treat organophosphate exposure. We have a 5-year-old boy who takes a sip from grandmother's bottle, which she keeps in the basement. It's a greeny smelly liquid and develops sludge. Sludge is the acronym from salivation, lacrimation, urination, diarrhea, GI pain and discomfort, and vomiting emesis. So a couple of MCQs developed. Which of the poisonings listed below is the most likely? Cholinesterase inhibitors, atropine-like substances, opioids, benzodiazepines, or cocaine. And the goal tells you that it's organophosphate, so it must be a cholinesterase inhibitor. And so on.
Okay. So could you, well, all right. Sorry, I won't go into it. Next one?
Just warn me, give me the questions, I have
No,
to
no, no.
prepare an answer.
It wasn't a criticism, I had an idea.
The answer for that is cholinesterase
All right, so here we go. Here we go.
It's been longer than the other one. So differentiate between, the goals are differentiate between types of stroke, generate a list of possible diagnoses, and devise a treatment plan. And so the scenario is a pre-medical student brings his father into the emergency department demanding treatment with a clot-busting drug. So his father had complained of a severe headache, collapsed, has altered mental status, neck stiffness, and right-sided weakness. And it started 4 hours and 28 minutes ago, and you don't have any testing. So what do you do? So A is treat with a clot-busting drug because the window's about to close, and he does have focal deficits. B, don't treat because the presentation is suspicious for subarachnoid hemorrhage. So do a lumbar puncture. CT, get a CT, a lumbar puncture, and possibly an angiogram. And then C is don't treat with TPA. There's no time to get a head CT, so just admit them and treat them faster.
Okay, good. Next one?
What's the answer? Oh, well,
Is there a right answer?
yeah, there is. He seems to have subarachnoid hemorrhage. His presentation is very suspicious. So B is the answer, don't treat.
Now I know. All right, next one.
My learning goal here is to explain the hormonal changes during the qualitative and secondary phase of menstrual cycle. This is one, the physiology of action. The scenario is 26-year-old female presents in the gynae with complaints of heavy menstrual bleeding after periods of 3 months of amenorrhea. Her pregnancy test is negative. Her physician suggests investigations for polycystic ovarian based on her past history. So what is the most likely cause of cabin bleed? So I just put three. One is prolonged proliferative phase with anovulation. There is prolonged secretory phase with anovulation, or prolonged ovulatory phase. These are three phases of menstruation. So after you get the answers from the students who go with one or two, then you give a mini lecture presentation and telling them, just review the normal hormonal changes during the menstrual cycle with them and explain that A is correct.
Got it.
Okay.
Very cool. And last but not least,
Okay, the goal here is that students calculate something called the relative risk that is commonly used in health research. And then this is a scenario. Sometimes I use small, actual, real information obtained from studies, taking words from, for example, from the abstract of one paper. In this case, I made something here. An investigator is comparing two drugs for treating fever in children. 15 out of the 100 children with the new drug had not controlled with the fever, and the figure among the group receiving the usual treatment is 25 out of 100. That's a scenario. Then the question is just asking them what the relative risk is, and I propose here 3 options, and one of them is correct, and the fourth it's not possible to calculate that with the data that is provided. Usually when I do this, I give them the formula as well, or at least a chance to find the formula, because my goal here is not that they learn formula by heart, if it's fine, but mostly that they learn how to apply the concept and to take data from one scenario and use it, even if I give them the formula.
cool. Okay, so beautiful. This is fantastic material for us to work with. And so now I'm going to call your tables groups, teams, whatever. So every table is going to get 2 sticky notes. And what you have to come to consensus on as a table are 2 things. One, which of these do you feel has the best alignment between the learning goals, the scenario, and the question? Like there's a clear straight line, top to bottom. And that for that one, I want you to just basically write a plus and stick it on somewhere. And then if you have ideas for how to extend any of these, or questions that you want to ask, or discussions that you want to start about any of these, if they spark off ideas in you or something you don't understand, then you put the question mark on that. But you have to come to consensus by table. You only get one each of these by table. Make sense?
Can we put it on our own posters?
You cannot put it on your own poster.
Can you advertise for our posters?
No lobbying.
Consultation.
No lobbying. All right, so here, that's your table. And you got it.
Thank you.
We don't get 2 or 3? No, just 1 for now. Plus goes on the best aligned activity. Question mark.
So we can't unflex.
I like that one.
Where is it, Lloyd?
Yeah, I have no idea.
We like this one. Because it's very clear.
So what am I going to say about it?
We just like it.
So what do I have to say? We like
Nothing, we like it.
So we put the plus sign on.
Oh, okay. That's all?
And then what do we do with the other one?
Yeah, we don't, there's still.
You don't have questions. These are all critical questions. I have no idea what they are. I can't.
Which department are you in?
Hey, we should start working on this version. We can actually.
On site to assess their own.
I think it's good. I think it's
I answer.
This is before this score or after this? Just after this score?
After the score, yeah. I know data to know who did what.
That was going to be my question about it.
What I do is,
There's quite a spectrum between
already, so I just
critical thinking that may or may not be involved. You asked which one is the most effective? Yeah. Okay.
the sheet that we made, there's also calculated see if I change this to 5.
I think they.
Because they have it.
I think they really recognize I think that's more
many units. I know. So they drove my
Yeah, that's very. I'm in the college of ed. This is not the college of ed. This is not the college of ed. They actually were not student yesterday. So they come here like 2 hours later. I was like, no way to get to the problem. Make sure you like extra 5 days.
I can also save it on the
No, I think it's recognized.
I think I see recognized, but I don't see trained.
It's recognized. Yeah. So there's no alignment. If it were identified.
I know, I was going to say that's right.
There's no opportunity for it. So the execution would be good. Right. I'm going to go.
It's only one MCQ, but it has 2 things they want to do. It looks like the next one, and then we have
Question mark on one more.
I'm working on the new program.
The second sticky is more suggesting you start a conversation. Okay, the second sticky is more conversation.
Do you have any coming up?
Yeah, I would, where's
Well, if there's anyone I want to see you enjoy, well, I'll show you the schedule. But number one, there's a lot left to do.
and then also the one,
It's not that much of a I'm going to see how many of them get.
well, I don't think it's, I don't think we would have to ask the question.
or we have an idea to make it.
Yeah.
Stick it on there.
Because if they told them three of them, they get very different answers.
if you could recount the beef. America.
Oh, I like that. You know, and then the suggestion. What website does this thing come from?
This is just a cheesy little.
Like somebody have another post-it? Yeah. Do you know, what's his, not with me, but I don't think I do, but, yeah. Jeff Bridges, you know Jeff Bridges, the actor?
Yes.
Go to his website, jeffbridges.com.
Okay.
There's so many cool things, but one of them are all kinds of things. It's just, you'll like it. I can tell your personality, it's fun. Yeah, jeffbridges.com.
All right, so we have 5 groups. Each have had 2 stickies. 4 groups, each of which had 2 stickies. And we have 6 stickies.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. Oh, there we go. All right, good. All right, I'm going to let it. I will. You put up 2, so you covering for somebody. You put up 3. Okay, so they're actually covering for somebody, y'all.
We didn't have any questions, so we didn't put up a question.
Oh, we put up your questions.
Oh, we put up your questions. I got your question right here. All right, so fantastic, great. All right, so now, just like in an application activity where you hold up a card, my role is just to facilitate the discussion among these artifacts, which demonstrate to me where there's conversation to be had. So we had two groups felt like this was the best aligned, that the activity, the thinking that they had to do, and the choice they had to make was best aligned with the learning goal. One team felt this was the best, and one, I believe, felt like this was the best. And I did get the question, you just mean the best aligned, right? Not like the juiciest? And I said, yes, the best aligned, not the juiciest. But that raises, so let me ask, actually it was Stephanie, you asked me that question. Tell me about that question. Just not in terms of who or whatever, but difference between alignment and juiciness. What is that?
Well, alignment is the logical flow between what you want your student to know and be able to do following the activity itself, the concept, does it build backwards to it, and then also the question. It's kind of it's a circular relationship. You should be able to think about it from top to bottom or bottom to top. But then the juiciness has to do with whether or not the scenario is getting at perhaps the cognitive skill that you want, or if you're kind of pushing your students to where you want them to go. So maybe you really want them to be able to make a decision, but the outcome, the goal, or the scenario isn't actually asking them to make a decision. It's actually maybe more of an application exercise. So the juiciness is, for me, it's the level of the activity. If it's really getting to what you want.
Got it. So I mean, a question like we had 2, the calculation question and then the sludge question were both really well aligned, clearly, and they were what I would consider very strong foundations to be built on in terms of
to get to the juice.
Scaffolding more complexity. So we have somebody going downstairs and drank something out of Mama's Little Helper and bottle and got something, and so okay, in a very simple situation, you can identify it, and then what I was about to say was, so how could you complexify this? Like, what would be the next, if you wanted to scaffold this out to being really blurry? This is a very clear right answer. So what would be something you could add to this to make it a little bit vaguer? I mean, I'm actually asking you, what might you add in that situation? Help me out here.
Well, that's a fundamental problem because I grew up in emergency medicine and anesthesia, and there's not much space for debate and discussion there. If you want to debate and discuss, you go into philosophy or internal medicine. So the arts are focused and fairly simple, and it's artificial to create, to add fuzziness to it, to something which you want to defuzz essentially. You want the person to be able to react quickly based on an assumption, which then turns out to be right or wrong, if the patient survives or not. But
right. But real world doesn't present that way. Real world presents fuzzy.
But Gary, what if the kid was taking a medication for something that might make one of those side
So you couldn't
effects
do the
like-
treatment.
Sure. And then you had two influences going on.
absolutely, but
And
you
then
have to
because
think,
you
you
have
have to
life
act.
lessons.
The issue is you have to act, and you want to make quick reaction possible. I mean, I'm biased, of course, and I went into emergency medicine because I act like that, and I don't enjoy that much discussing issues. No, but it's personality. You choose your specialty based on your preferences.
But we still have to make the students discuss.
Well, those of them who don't go into emergency medicine.
So even if you're in emergency medicine, it's not about talking about it. It's about decomplexifying, as you say. And so real world presents in a complex way. I mean, the kid could be on medication. Some tests could come back ambiguous. And so I'm not trying to introduce complexity for complexity's sake. What I'm trying to do is ask, I wonder what details in the real world might be included in a situation like this that an emergency care person might have to sort through really quickly and act upon.
I can answer the question, but it's very, very specific. For instance, based on the inhibition of the cholinesterase, you would expect bradycardia, a slowing of the heart rate. And this is emphasized in many books. In real life, it doesn't happen because the hypoxia makes your heart beat faster. You know, so there are levels of complexity to it. The question is whether you go from simple to complex or from complex to simple. The first year, I think that you have black and white scenarios, and then while they advance to the medical training, the reality becomes more ugly.
You complexify it. Yeah, that's exactly, I mean, and that's a really, really interesting if you go from complex to simple or simple to complex. Because problem-based learning is going from complex to simple. Team-based learning is going from simple to complex. That's kind of the flipping I was talking about earlier. But yeah, you get my point, is that the closer you get them to reality, the nastier you make it so that they're used to grappling with
Absolutely.
Yep.
So to make it concrete, it's complexifying it is really adding more factors that you have to take into account in making the decision. And at your high level of experience, you may be very quick and adept at making an emergency-based choice in less than a minute with 20 different factors, but the beginning student can only maybe deal with 2. And then as they grow, so sometimes it's a matter of taking our own selves back in time and thinking about what was it like when I was slow? What was tough for me when I was slow, when I hadn't internalized this information?
When you were first learning how to drive a car.
Yes, yeah, you could only deal with
And I'm trying to think about everything
the
all at once.
speed and the gas pedal and the brake, and that's it.
And the clutch.
Yeah.
And then it becomes automatized over time. Other thoughts, ideas? This is a great conversation. All right. So question mark, we have a question, well, I think we had a question mark.
Can I say something about the eco footprint one?
Sure.
The one way to make that one more complex is to look at different calculators. In other words, there are several different footprint calculators out there. And based on the underlying objective of whoever put the calculator together, the answer could be very different. And the number could be different.
You could send them to one for this. And then you could say, all right, here are 4 different URLs.
Right.
Which of the following do you feel is the best
Exactly.
footprint calculator and why?
Exactly.
And then they'd have to look at like, oh, this is the Beef Council's website. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the Texas footprint.
Right. Everything's bigger in Texas, including our ecological footprints, which is probably true. All right, so was there another question about this one, or there was somebody said?
We just were wondering where the treatment part was in this part.
So this is diagnosis.
Yeah, that's just
That was recognized, and then the next 5 questions are treatment and whatever.
Right. Good. Okay, so let's look at this question mark over here. Who put the question mark up here?
Ours.
Your team, what was that about?
But that was your own, wasn't it?
No, that was theirs.
Oh, that was theirs, okay.
No, I was questioning which statistical model or what is it that needed first to obtain the relative risk. How do you calculate the relative risk?
Oh, so
It's just a ratio of one number divided by the other. So usually you don't even need sometimes even a calculator. In this case, you wouldn't need even a calculator. You need only simple math. It's a ratio.
Got it, cool. And there's a note here. Add another option that begins with treatment. Can somebody?
No, just, I mean, I think you could create another, you know, on option D, she's got two that say don't treat, and then she has one that says treat. And so I think it would be a little bit richer if she had two options for each.
A little parallel, isn't it? Good. Okay, so you wanted to get some feedback on this one. What kind of feedback are you looking for? What kind of input would you like?
Is this a more towards problem-based learning, or is this more towards team-based learning, or it's not?
I don't think it falls, it's just an application question. I'm not sure that it's a flavor in one way or another. Yeah.
So we can use these kind of scenarios during our application.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other ideas about how to extend these that we can give to the authors, since they were brave enough to put them up on the wall?
What about having students create application activities? Do you have any experience with that?
The only experience that I have with something similar to that is having students way prior to a test, having them write a handful of test questions that they feel, like I'll have them write 3 test questions and they just get credit or don't get credit for doing it. But I'll tell them, if there's some really good ones, I'll use them. And so what that does is that motivates them to not make them lame. That motivates them to actually think, what would be a really good question about the content that we covered? And actually research shows that switching their thinking in that way gets them to do metacognition around the material in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. These are hard enough for us to do.
Right.
You know, it would be an interesting activity to try and get students to generate one.
Then the other question was, do you have experience with faculty who use the application exercises as a way of building towards then students' individual research? You know, so students generating further questions or research questions based on the scenario, and then going off and individually doing things and bringing it back to the group to kind of enrich the
to extend.
this whole scenario and get them thinking and generate research questions in an applied setting.
I think that's a great idea. I don't have any experience with it, but students get geeked up about certain topics. The more that they engage them in class, if you can get them geeked up to go out, really, truly, honestly engage with them, would be fantastic. So,
Here's a question.
yeah.
Put us back in the context. Now that we got these scenarios, applications, committed back into the team-based sequence that you're saying that we should be trying to use. Put us back in the big picture.
Right, in the big picture. So, the team-based learning, prototypically, and I'm not saying that we have to dot all your I's and cross all your T's exactly this way, but prototypically, archetypically, whatever typically, you'd have a team-based learning unit, which on the first day, you would have assigned some preparation, readings, websites, whatever. They come, they do the readiness assurance process, they clarify stuff with one another. You, from the outcomes of that readiness assurance process, get a beat on what they really understand and what they really still don't understand. They're primed to hear a quick lecture about that. You deliver that lecture. Then, at this point, you start moving into stuff like this. You might have the first day be something like this, which is basically just an early multiple choice activity. To get them applying at a more complexified level the material that they now are, you for sure have made certain that they have under their belt. Now they're trying to apply it. So you could do something like this on the first day, whatever. And then you might unfold more of these over the next couple of days. That's what many teachers do, is they'll have increasingly complex application activities in different formats, not all exactly the format, over the rest of the unit. There's probably other stuff that you want to include in your class that you like, movies to show, guest speakers, artifacts that you want to demonstrate, that kind of thing, that would be relevant to the unit. But the idea, the simple idea, the kind of template idea of a team-based learning unit is on the first day they come, they do the readiness assurance, they get what they understand and don't understand is diagnosed and clarified by you, and then you escalate the complexity of their application of that material to more and more complex scenarios. That's the shape of it. And that can look, it can start out looking like this, but there's other formats for simultaneous report as well, which are pretty crafty. So we've done two. We've done the holding up a card. We've done a gallery walk. There are, let's see, I want to so there's image sorting. This is an art history. This is an art history activity trying to help students in art history class distinguish between Viking and Celtic art styles, which there are differences. They're 1,000 years apart in history. So the objectives here are to recall what they know about the stylistic features, compare and differentiate the artifacts below, and then also organize them by age. So there's 3 Celtic artifacts and 3 Viking artifacts here. And then you might have students, you could have them do this maybe online, you could have them do it with Xeroxed pictures that you hand out. I got this idea from a pediatric nurse who used it with pictures of normal and abnormal infants. You know, by a certain age, babies should be holding their head on center line and not flop to one side and that kind of thing. And so she just had them normal, abnormal, and they were Xerox copied black and white photos, and they had to put them up on the wall in a normal and abnormal categories and explain to the rest of their classmates why they categorized them that way. I'm a big fan of Viking history, so I did this one. But there are some other formats, and I want to get to, well, I'll show you 2 things. There was this is from a medical school, and what's brilliant about this is the teams had to make a specific choice, A, B, C, D. But the rationale they had to turn in to back up their choice that was graded was a concept map.
That's gorgeous.
Okay, so they held up a card, A, B, C, D, right, whatever. But before they did that, they had to work as teams to concept map their thinking behind that answer. And those concept maps were graded. And when I first heard that, I thought, whoa, what the hell, grading a concept map? How do you grade a concept map? Well, they have this really cool rubric that was simple. And the students knew this is what the rubric was going to be used. Content, logic, and understanding, presentation were the categories. Pretty simply described. I'll let you read them. I won't read them to you. So one of the cool pieces of Kung Fu I like about this is also the fact that it makes clear that these 2 categories are the most important. You can either get 6 points or 5 points within this level of proficiency, but these are only worth 3. Like, I don't really care how good an artist you are. You just got to be able to communicate what your thinking is. So that's a nice little, there's some extra granularity along these criteria that there's not in this one. I like that a lot. You know you're a geek when things come out of your mouth like, this rubric is inspiring. Right? And that happened to me when I was doing a presentation of a friend. It's actually the history teacher. She's doing a whole big thing on thinking like a historian. And she's broken it out to 4 kind of moves you make, grounding yourselves in the grounding yourselves in the artifacts. Students should, these are all verbs now. Identify biological say, information about the author of a original source, speculate on the intended audience. So this is the first thing, base level of thinking like a historian. Then you get up into constructing, identify ways in which sources relate to one another, determining points of view, reconciling divergence of thought, a little bit more high level, and then connecting, and I don't need to read these all to you, but what's super inspiring is this is her rubric for connecting. So she will look at work students do, papers that they produce, even as individuals, or those templates, those big templates as a team, and use this to evaluate that kind of thinking.
You have two people in the room who have or are in the midst of doing dissertations on rubrics.
Really?
So we got a couple geeks.
Okay. My people. Yeah. It's deep thought. I mean, it's really deeply thought consideration of what student work that is produced as a result of having learned something looks like.
But these can be used for any kind of a performance activity. So for poster presentations, debates, research, speeches, anything.
Yeah. They're very, very wonderful for reducing your own anxiety when it comes to grading things, and for also communicating to your students what something good looks like ahead of time. Yeah. So rubric construction is at the heart of a lot of like teaching techniques that are awesome in many ways, but rubric construction is, if you can do this, you going backwards from this to all of those is much, much easier, and a whole different workshop. Anyway, I wanted to show that off to you because I think that that's just a lovely example of what can be done, and ways that application activities can be more than just multiple choice questions.
Are those posted on the website?
No, those aren't actually. I'd be happy to share that with you, but she's still in the middle of, like, that constructing rubric is the only one I have.
That's a great rubric.
Yeah, she's still writing, it's from a manuscript.
You could send that to.
I can send that to you. All right, so let me make a note. The online article, the rubric, the history rubric, and the image sorting. Yeah, I'll send those three.
Yeah, then we'll send it out. Just to clarify, everyone signed something when they came in this morning. So everyone's contacted.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about application activities being graded or not graded, so tell me again what you think is best.
What I think is best. It depends, of course, which is the most infuriating answer. But it depends upon what you want, what your purpose for that application activity is. If it truly is to assess mastery of material, then I think grading it, maybe with a rubric, is and a rubric can be very simple. Like, you hold up a letter, but before you do that, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to write up a half-page rationale as a team. You've got to cite evidence from the readings. And your rubric can just be, conclusion was sound, use of evidence was appropriate. I mean, it can be just that simple.
So you let them use books for the application activity?
Yes. Because the idea is they've got the basics, and application should be pushing them into complex use of it. And so you don't want them to be fettered by recall concerns at this point. At this point, the purpose is application. So yeah, if your intention of an application activity is to assess mastery, and that's super important to you, mastery in terms of being able to make a choice and demonstrate a clear rationale for it, grading it is fine. If you feel like the value of the application activity is to force students into careful analysis of where the contours of one concept ends and another concept begins, or weighing the merits of this versus that in a situation where there may not be a very right answer, you you can't choose to grade or not grade. I think even if there isn't a right answer, like a for sure right answer, you can certainly ask them to produce rationales for the choices, which you can grade. You know, maybe A, B, and C are all right answers, but a crappy rationale for A shouldn't get credit. You know, so this is again one of those places where you have to do what feels best for you in your use of this stuff.
So if you're doing an IRAT and a GRAT and then you grade the application exercise, are you overburdening them with exams every day or?
Well, like I said, the readiness, the IRAT and the TRAT, the individual readiness assessment test and team readiness assessment test, those are things that should only happen half a dozen times or maybe a little bit more across the semester. These application activities, again, it's up to you. If your student population is one that will just get up and walk out unless there's points attached to something, then you probably should attach points to it. But if they're the kind of student population where having done the individual test and the team test, and now they start to see how this stuff can actually be put to use in real life, that's actually motivating them. The utility value of something, it has been shown by research to be a motivating influence on people's acquisition of it as learners. So it's really cool to see, oh wow, this is now, I am becoming equipped by this experience. It's not just a hoop I'm jumping through. So yeah.
Could you use a more qualitative scale, such as, you know, excellent, good, fair, poor, or something like that?
So I'm going to interpret that question as would I personally, because again, it's so context relative, there's not one thing I can recommend. I personally, again, it would depend upon the application, or depend upon my purpose of the application. In this freshman class I taught last semester, I had them do, they all read this book, this piece of historical fiction, and I had them do concept maps, asking them to identify characters and events surrounding the idea of isolation in the book. And so I said, any way you want to depict that graphically, go for it. So as the teams, they brainstormed how to depict the characters and events in the book that they felt contributed to the theme of isolation. And then they gallery walked and made some specific choices. I didn't grade that one because there were fantastic conversations they had, and those were what I wanted.
I'd like to know your views on the relationship, if there is any, between use of team-based learning and mandatory participation. So if you use TBL, does it go hand in hand to making that session mandatory? Or can you say, up to you, or what you do with that?
So you mandatory attendance?
Well, yeah, to give a concrete example, I'm teaching a essentially lecture-based course with no mandatory participation. The participation is very good. I will introduce TBL, attendance will drop like a stone. So, the question is, you believe that using TBL is a moral excuse for making it mandatory?
No. A moral excuse for making mandatory. I'm sorry, I've never had it.
English is not my first language, so I apologize for.
No. Do you have an answer to that? I have an answer to it. Okay.
But you can give your answer first.
Okay. So most people have the opposite experience.
Yeah.
Most people have the experience that if they just lecture, students don't show up.
Well, there's an explanation for that, but let's not get into that now.
Right. Well, now you got me curious.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure other people would like to learn.
No, I'm a free marketer, essentially. I believe in the free market, so if your product is good, people will buy.
I agree.
So I'm not against or in favor of any teaching format. If you're good enough at what you're doing, then do it. As that's my view on it. And I know that I'm much better at lecturing than doing TBL. And I know that when I offer a voluntary lecture, I have a good attendance. The moment I introduce TBL, attendance will drop like a rock because too many students don't believe that that's meaningful use of their time. That's the reality. So coming back to the TBL and the advantage derived from this format, would you go along and say it's so important, it's so good to be making mandatory, like it or not?
There is a lot of experience in medical education that shows that medical students like TBL.
Well, there's a lot of experience to the opposite as well. So that's a different issue.
Just because they're there, do we know they're learning?
Yeah, I was just
Well,
gonna
for whatever
ask
reason,
that.
I don't know
I have
why.
a way around that.
Descriptive.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
do we know that they're learning?
The first time we did an LA activity, which is basically a group LA activity, we got lots and lots of complaints.
A group what activity?
It's an LAs are learning assistants.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Who go into your class,
Uh-huh.
and we have a problem-based learning activity.
Uh-huh,
So we
okay.
have about 6 LAs and the professor, or 5 or 6 LAs and the professor walking around helping the
complain.
students with the activity.
Mhm.
The first time we did the activity, the students hated it. They hated us. They
We have to
much
think.
rather we lecture, but then they hit gold. A question related to that activity would be on the exam. And everybody who did that activity profited. Those of them who didn't take it seriously would not profit. And it worked for us because we were helping the students learn, and it worked for them too. So that's one way around it. So you could actually, when you do the iGraph, you could have that be a part of their grade.
I don't want to achieve a particular outcome, I'm just asking
No, I'm
as a
just
voluntary
giving you a
participation
suggestion,
is.
yeah. So you can have that be a part of their grade. So if that's a part of their grade, they're gonna take it seriously, and especially after that, if they have a discussion, and if they think, if you're, supposing you're doing it for, I'm just gonna say 3 weeks, and if one of those
Yeah.
questions shows up on the exam, they will consider it time well spent.
So could,
That's just been my experience.
Over lunch, we had this discussion at that table down there where, having taught here for a number of years, medical anthropology to pre-med students, different health professions, all kinds of professions, it turns out the students that are driving to get into medical school, which is the ones that we have, they're bean counters. They want to score, they want a point for everything, and they want, when they come into a class, they want the teacher to tell them exactly what they need to know. They got a textbook, they had to read this thick, but you need to tell them exactly what they need to know because they want to pass the test. And so that's the kind of students you have. It's the culture of the students flowing into there. So how to change the culture is the issue here over to the different kind of learning, the different kind of expectations from the teacher and the student.
so I'm rapidly trying to assemble there's a book called How Learning Works that has been produced by Carnegie Mellon. And it's a much, much better version of a book called How People Learn that came out quite a while ago. How Learning Works is written to college teachers. Every chapter begins with some common complaints that we hear from college teachers. The book then goes through the learning science literature and explains why that horrific outcome occurs. And it's organized around 7 learning principles. This is what, and learning science is getting like legit. I mean, neuroscience, fMRIs, all kinds of studies. It's less and less anecdotal stuff
Brain research.
and more biochemical stuff. And so the reason I bring this up is because I truly do believe every teacher should teach to their strengths. If you're a magnificent lecturer, you should include some of your magnificent lecture in your class. You'd be depriving your students of a potential source of value otherwise.
No, we agree on that.
Okay. And there are also some pretty hard and fast findings that we have generated about how human beings actually rewire their brains to acquire knowledge, memories, cognitive schema, so that they can be retrieved and put to use when relevant. Lecture in certain situations can facilitate that. Bransford, who led How People Learn, has this great article called The Time for Telling, that there is a time when lecture can be the very best delivery system, but it's only after students have been primed by trying to explain differences in competing aspects of the content. When they've grappled with it already and succeeded or failed to a certain extent, that's when the time for telling is perfect.
Because they have a
That's when they're
cognitive
primed
schema.
for it. Yeah.
Is that article available?
It's called The Time for Telling. Lead author is Bransford. Bransford, yeah. All right, one more thing to the list. I'll email it to you. It's on my desktop.
I have it from the lister.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I sent it out on the list. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. But this book we have in our
I'll send
office, that we have some that you can check out. Aesthetically Advancement of Teaching. We have the
It's an
How Learning
awesome
Works.
book.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. We're redoing our all the instructional recommendations we make on our website. We're redoing to follow along these
Yeah,
lines.
it's
A lot of people are doing.
Website?
Oh, no, the CTL web, the website that I,
Okay.
yeah, it sucks right now. Don't go look at our website right now. We're currently redoing it. We haven't finished that yet. I only raised this as a response to your question about, because your question is both instructional and cultural. Instructionally, I would say students have to actively grapple with stuff. Learning science tells us that. To truly learn it, they have to actually try to make use of it, and they have to try and either accommodate it or assimilate it into their existing cognitive schema. Okay? That's what learning science tells us. However, you're also facing cultural pressures from them because they have these deeply driven emotional urge, instinct, impulse, driven by these tests, right? The medical boards that they're going to have to pass, and that's really front and center to them all the time. And anything that distracts from that is annoying, irritating, unprofessional, right? Okay. So I guess, and I am not in your field, and so the direction I would try to head would be to build activities in which students grapple with this stuff actively, try and do the activities that we know help people learn or are required for people to learn, and somehow make those activities pointed directly at the medical board test. So if there's a subject or an outcome or something that's specified by a specific board exam, and I'm way out of my depth here, so I beg your indulgence on that. But if there's some way you can build an activity that links clearly with this particular part of the boards, which might be one of the aspects of the test that people usually don't do well in, that might be something that they consider a worthwhile activity because it will equip them for that, getting through that knothole.
You are exactly on the point, but still let me rephrase the question.
Sure.
Personally, I don't believe that there is a moral excuse for making the lecture mandatory.
I agree completely.
So, extrapolating to TBL, I would say that over TBL, the people craft was proof in the pudding. But if you tell me that it's for the good of the students to make it mandatory, because otherwise they don't profit, I have my doubts. I'm wondering how you see it.
So what I would probably, the only tweak I would probably put on that would be make the first one or two mandatory. So they at least get a real taste and the potential benefit from it. And then if they want to back away, they back away. But nobody gets through medical school or nursing school alone, I don't think. I mean, people, what I have heard from people in these disciplines is that you've got to stick together, you got to help each other, not in terms of cheating on tests and stuff like that, but having a network of peers facing similar challenges, a support system really, both academically and personally, can make all the difference, and this builds that in.
Yeah, and I mean, I have found, we're starting to try to be very transparent with our students about why we're using the methods that we're using. And when I did introduce TBL to this last group that we just started with, I was very clear with them that part of this is to learn how to learn and teach in teams, because that is, the days of the little bitty private practitioner are almost extinct, and so everything about medicine now survives on the function of systems and teams of people. So even if you learn best in a team, and even if that individually, and even if that's the most efficient thing for you to do, and even that's how you're going to ace USMLE and everything else, for you, for your individual goal, that works. But ultimately, what residency program directors care about and what hospital systems care about is the ability to play and learn in the sandbox together. And so, and I think especially as they get a little closer to clinical experience, they start to see and understand that. Because we'll occasionally have students who say, well, I can come here to teach other people. I don't, I'm smart, I don't need all this. But I feel as a physician who's trying to, prepare them for ultimate residency and practice, that they need to hear that. And as a faculty member, my moral imperative for making them do it is that there's a whole separate skill set that's involved in showing up to these exercises that they're going to get, even beyond being able to perform well in USMLE, design our examinations to that end.
And if their moral imperative is to save lives and produce health and that kind of thing, they'll do it better when they can work with other adults who
Yeah, they have to. They won't have a choice, really.
Right.
I mean, it's very seldom that they're going to be individual actors in the delivery.
I'm aware that we're over time,
Yeah.
right?
Just, we have to be
Out of the room.
totally cleaned up by
Okay.
4.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, and we said, I think, 3 or 3:30 around. So one more question, and then,
All right, well, all right, we're going to pull these together. One is that in the anthropology side, we're trying to get health people to provide culturally sensitive healthcare. It's not only working in teams among the health people, but also working with the community and the clients and the patients in ways that are humane and clear communication in ways that are sensitive to where people are coming from in their own culture. And so by incorporating these kind of learning experiences in the class, you can have that purpose. But the way I got the question about the grading and having it mandatory, the way I got over that in the years past was that, well, you get tests and you have your papers and your required things. But I inserted a thing called exercises into the total score of the course. And now it's like 20 points for exercises. And so that's what these are. Exercises designed specifically to teach certain things where they have to come together as groups and do things. And they get points for that. And so the points motivated them to be engaged and be there, as the testing does. But that's kind of a way of inserting this into a combined lecture course and learning exercise course.
One final comment, and it's a paper that has not yet been published but is in publication right now. A really cool piece of research that some folks that I think Larry was in on, and he's the one that told me about it. Students from team-based learning class were then followed because of the way that courses were sequenced at this particular school. The following classes were, there was one team-based learning class, one class that was number 1 in the sequence, it was team-based learning. Other courses that were number 1 in the sequence were not team-based learning. Course number 2 in the sequence, they all used peer evaluations of some kind. Some were team-based learning, some were not. So the students in the team-based learning, number 1 in the sequence course, they looked at the peer evaluations that those students got in number 2 in the sequence from their students there, and they all got higher peer evaluations from the folks in the subsequent courses with whom they worked. And so the argument is that being in the team-based learning class implicitly taught them those team
How to be a
skills.
team, how to be a team.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of arguments. I haven't actually read it, but that's what I've heard. We gotta go. Thank you, everybody.